Hi, I'm audible. Sorry.
Yes, you are.
Okay. So, hi everyone. It's nice to meet you. I'm your host Akash Maskar, and I'm delighted to welcome you all on this new session for BIS Research Tech-novation. Today's topic is rewiring healthcare: how digital therapeutics are transforming treatment beyond the pill. And I'm delighted to welcome our speaker today, Mr. Sorin Badiani from Sorin Badiani Consultancy. Sorin is a seasoned expert in the digital health space. He is widely recognized in his expertise and in comprehensive landscape analysis and establishing pioneering regional digital health networks. Now, Sorin has also worked extensively in multiple companies across digital therapeutics and digital spaces. And today, Sorin will be sharing some valuable insights on how digital therapies are shaping the future of healthcare at large. So, with further ado, I would like to take a moment to highlight a quote that Einstein once said: "The doctor of the future will give no medication, but interest in patient, in the care of human frame, diet, and in the cause of prevention of disease." This resonates strongly with the preventive, data driven, and non pharmacological foundation of the digital therapeutics, where lifestyle, behavior, and personalized care are front and center. We are at a pivotal moment in medicine where the most powerful prescriptions might not come from a bottle, but as an app, a game, or even a digital coaching program. For managing chronic diseases like diabetes and hypertension to treating mental health conditions like insomnia, digital therapeutics are reshaping how we think and think about care. And now, as we provide evidence-based personalized care that is accessible anytime and anywhere, let's drive into the future where algorithms complement and even replace the pill, and where technology becomes a trusted ally in lifelong health management. With this, I'd like to invite Sorin to provide his opening statements on today's topic. Sorin, I welcome you on behalf of BIS Research.
Thanks, Akash, and thanks, BS Research team, for inviting me for this Tech-novation session. I'm really pleased to share my insights, what I've learned across my last 20 years, and we'll be looking forward to some great interactions from the live audience as well. Not sure if you are able to view my screen. I will read.
Yeah, it's visible, Sorin. Please go
Thanks,
ahead.
thanks, Akash. So, a quick introduction. Akash did mention about my background, but yes, 20 plus years into digital health and digital therapeutics. Started my career in R&D at universities in UK, Warwick and Manchester. Then moved into pharma and biopharma industry. Have worked at Johnson and Johnson, Daiichi Sankyo, Mundipharma, Pharmanovia, also in medtech with Smith and Nephew and other multiple payers and providers in close collaborations with them. I've worked across multiple therapeutic areas, as can be seen on the screen. I've worked in digital health space. Have conceived and launched digital plus outside drug plus digital combos, also standalone digital therapeutics in 12 plus markets. In terms of end-to-end ownership, from conceptualization to evidence generation and taking products through approvals and getting reimbursement and into markets. Again, my key strengths are into setting that strategic vision, innovation lifecycle management, building solutions and launching them. I've demonstrated impacts through patient outcomes gains as well as cost reductions within healthcare systems. And specifically worked around personalized and precision medicines and solutions, leveraging the real world data. So that's my background in quick minute or so. Who we are, I mean, as Akash mentioned, I've gone solo as a Savan Badiani Consulting, and these are the type of services that I'm offering to my clients at the moment. I won't go into details. End-to-end support across full product life cycle, right from vision and strategy to business executions, having right level of development around digital health, digital therapeutics, raising funds, and getting regulatory and compliance approvals through to marketing digital healthcare solutions through all sorts of channels. So again, we provide holistic services specifically into digital health and digital therapeutic space. Some of the success stories in here in terms of developing and launching digital health deployment in multiple markets, multiple therapeutic areas, multiple, I would say, large size and medium sized hospitals to business development and strategy execution, through to conducting due diligence for M&As and cross industry collaborations for some investors as well. Over to you, Akash, to consider the insights that you would want to get from me for today's session.
Thank you so much, Sorin. So, thank you firstly for the lovely introduction. Now, before we delve into the uh, discussing digital therapeutics at large, let's begin with a quick understanding how you perceive digital therapeutics as a subject.
Thanks, Akash. So, what I would say that before I respond, what I would say that digital therapeutics is a subset of digital health, and digital health is used in a very broad fashion. From my experience leading global outside digital health and drug and SMD initiatives, I would say that digital health is an umbrella term which includes very broader spectrum of technologies in terms of telehealth, wearables, remote monitoring devices, patient engagement, patient support programs using the technologies as such. It's quite broad in a way, but when you talk about digital therapeutics, it's however a very distinct and a more rigorously defined subset, I would say, and that is all driven by right sort of evidence base, software driven, I would say, therapeutic interventions that are often regulated as a medical devices and are designed to, I would say, prevent, manage, including monitoring of diseases or conditions, or to treat a medical conditions or a disease on its own or in combinations with pharmaceutical products. Again, it can be used on its own. So that's where I would say it's a term being used as in a quite broader sense, and people do use interchangeably digital health, digital therapeutics. But I would say that digital therapeutics comes with a very strong evidence based for right level of intervention that will drive clinical outcomes improvement.
Thank you. And I do understand that digital therapeutics has seen a drastic momentum post COVID. Now, post COVID, there has been a foundation of infrastructure and openness that didn't exist before. And during the pandemic, we have seen growth in the adoption of digital therapeutics tremendously. But
Mhm.
now more and more users are shifting towards value outcomes instead of volume outcomes. So, how do you see the digital therapeutics market evolving in the next 3 to 5 years, especially post COVID digital adoption fatigue?
Well, if you really see now that if you are looking ahead, in terms of the way forward, I would say that it's more from a regulatory and reimbursement point of view. I believe that digital therapeutic market will mature from experimentation stage, where we see a lot of pilots being implemented till now, to more structured and evidence driven and reimbursable solutions. Specifically, if you really look at it in chronic conditions and diseases and mental health, that you would have had seen now. But again, what we have seen is post COVID, there are certainly degrees of digital adoption fatigue that you can say. But I would argue that we are now entering into a phase of digital selectivity, not just digital decline. I would say patients are more selective, so it's more driving towards more evidence-based scale up. moving away from pilots as such. So when we talk about that, it's more that we shall see more of real world data and evidence in this space. You'll see lots and lots of publications around the studies or implementation at scale. You'll see a lot of health technology assessments being done for digital therapeutics or combination therapeutics as such. And more of these will be driven by the pragmatic trials in going forward. When we talk about additional things, there are quite a lot of companies who have set precedents. If you really talk about in evidence generation space, specifically started with Pear Therapeutics, though company faced business challenges, but they were among the first one to get regulatory approvals for digital therapeutics, as such with their Reset and Reset IO program. And again, they have set the benchmark in terms of what evidence generation is all about when you talk about digital therapeutics. Again, coming back to market access decisions, especially in Europe, you'll see that reimbursement still remains quite fragmented. In other markets where it is patients who are paying or insurers, such evidence will be a great, I would say, basis for willingness to pay. So again, evidence will drive, I would say, adoption or implementation in markets. Second comes is the regulatory and reimbursement framework harmonization. You'll see that learning from markets like US, Germany, France, Belgium, UK, where there are some regulatory reimbursement framework being set. We very well know about Germany being leader in terms of DGAS, where there are 69, I would say, digital therapeutics being listed, approved for reimbursement. As well as the way we are seeing more is around world learning from them. And this will increase. You'll see not many markets will start accepting digital health, digital therapeutics in a way they will be approved for reimbursement as well. Next is around, you'll see a lot of hybrid care models as such when we talk about digital therapeutics. I mean, it definitely digital therapeutics won't replace the traditional therapies. I wish it could, but again, it will be considered as complementing them for specifically in terms of chronic and long-term care, where these technologies will enable appropriate interventions at appropriate time. Digital therapeutics will enable multidisciplinary team care for patients, and it will help towards making it more patient-centric. Also, we can look at the next that we'll see is that there'll be more sustainable and patient-centric care coming up. Again, not just from preventative perspective, but also from remote and personalized care offering will be more deployable at scale beyond pilots in the future. And there'll be a lot of focus on usability and engagement as well. I mean, we have seen, in my experience, I've seen and work with quite a lot of startups as well as quite a lot of digital health and digital therapeutics companies. What I've even seen is that there are many level of interfaces, right from very complex dashboards and reports to even patients interfaces, which seems simple to operate. As we know, like in India and in other developing markets, a lot of healthcare is now driven by very simplistic interface that we have on our mobile phones is via WhatsApp. I mean, there is a lot of communication between patients and clinicians or physicians via WhatsApp. So again, as simple as that will drive a greater usability and engagement in terms of making sure that digital therapeutics sees that long-term future. And again, also as you very well highlighted, Akash, that video games or mobile phone based games based therapies or cognitive behavioral therapies, where usability and engagement will be a lot more simpler, a lot more engaging. That is what we'll see coming in the future as well. More and more of that in digital therapeutic space.
Thank you for highlighting how the digital therapeutics will emerge in the next few years. Uh, Also, when we see about the digital therapeutics as the correct market, we see a significant uptake of digital therapeutics in mental disorders
Yeah.
or neurological conditions, and most of the products that are already commercialized are either for mental or neurological disorders. For instance, there is Rejoina for major depressive disorder, or there is Daylight RX for generalized anxiety disorder. So we see a lot of things happening in the mental or neurological space. What disease areas do you believe are most ripe for digital therapeutics innovation beyond the common ones that are the mental health and I think diabetes is another space where there's a lot that's happening. But apart from these, which two do you see that are very ripe?
Well, if you really would want to look at disease areas, first of all, I would say that digital therapeutics can be implemented in any, I would say, areas that you would want. It's all driven by you looking at the pain points that patients are facing across the patient's care pathways, the pain points that clinicians and physicians are facing in their day-to-day lives, as well as what are the systemic challenges. And if you come with an appropriate digital intervention that could solve these sort of pain points, solve these sort of challenges, and make things more sustainable, there is a possibility for you to have appropriate digital therapeutics in there. As far as you are able to generate right level of evidence to show that there is a clinical outcomes improvement, there is a cost benefit, the system can be deployed at scale. You can get into, I would say, any disease areas that you want to make improvements and show the impact. I mean, some of the examples that I can give you are where I have got experience is around the cardiovascular diseases, specifically when you talk about heart failure. What really happens in heart failure is, despite the advancements in, I would say, interventional interventions, specifically from pharmacological or cardiac synchronous treatments, where you see patients being fitted with pacemakers implanted, or even heart transplant, we still see that there is a poor quality of life, and the survival is quite low. If you talk about 1 year survival is around 80%, to, if you say about 5 year survival will be 50%, and 10 year to be 30%. That should not be the case. I mean,
Mhm.
if patients are provided right level of cardiac rehabilitation in an effective, again, along with the effective treatment that promotes right sort of exercise, reduce cardiovascular risk, and improves heart related quality of life. I mean, there are publications which do talk about that effective cardiac rehabilitation will have a better outcomes for heart failure patients. So, and again, that is this current evidence that there will be approximately 25% improvement if patients are continuing with the right level of, I would say, cardiac rehabilitation. And again, we know that what the challenges with cardiac rehabilitation that we know are the chronic fatigue, or I would say shortness of breath, again, age, gender, as well as more comorbidities could have an impact. But nowadays you can have wearable devices. There is a company called Visible who have got a right level of
Mhm.
patches, which collects, I would say, psychological data in terms of heart rate, respiration, your activity levels, and they correlate with fatigue and shortness of breath. Along with that, there is a possibility for you to collect patient-reported outcomes and patient-reported experiences. Based on that, you can really create a personalized cardiac rehabilitation, still complying with the guidelines that we see. So with the help of these digital interventions, you can personalize the care so that patients are not exhausted. They still continue with the right level of treatment, with the right level of rehabilitation, and they get better outcomes for that. Again, that's one example. Another one is chronic pain and musculoskeletal conditions. As we very well know, due to opioid crisis, what has really happened in terms of the medications for chronic pain. So again, now there are digital therapeutics based on CBTs, based on pain management. There are neuromodulation, neuroplasticity training using games that patients can play for 15 minutes on mobile phone, and their pain threshold reduces over the time. So again, you can see there are a number of examples. Again, neurological, specifically with epilepsy and seizures. I mean, I was at an event last year in Portugal, Tech Brain Health and Mental Health event, where I met a founder who's developing a patch that can, I would say, forecast seizures. Now, just imagine if you can forecast seizures earlier on, even half an hour early to an hour early, you can well prepare patients to be in a safe place, to have them
Mhm.
with the right level of medications as such. That can be used for active seizure controls. So again, things can be personalized, things can be made much more easier and better for patients with such a conditions, as such. Again, there are other solutions you just mentioned about that can be used for addiction and substance use
Right.
disorder as well, specifically with reset. You can see that a lot of cognitive behavioral therapies are now given via smartphone apps rather than patients visiting therapists as such. And again, there are also solutions where they are prescribed as a digital therapeutics, some as a patient support programs, but they are going through right level of, I would say, regulatory clearance to get it into the prescription mode. So yes, as I mentioned, it's not limited to chronic conditions, diabetes, or just mental health. But yes,
Mhm.
you utilize these technologies and develop a solution, a program, or digital therapeutics standalone, or in combination with pharmacological intervention, as such, based on addressing the pain points that various stakeholders are facing in the journey.
Got it. So let's also discuss about the reimbursement. Now, we do see a lot of products, digital therapeutic products emerging in the market, right? But most of the regulated market is highly dependent on reimbursement. Uh, so what we see is a very slow and steady implementation of reimbursement programs. Now, Germany, as you also said, Germany's digital health applications, that is DIGA program, has been one of the gold standards or global benchmark, I would say. Uh, but and we are also seeing that US is warming up to the adoption of digital therapeutics. But how have you observed a shift in the peer perception towards reimbursement of digital therapeutic solutions? And then what are the leading indicators of that change?
Sure. What I can say is that there has been a gradual shift in peers' perception. As you rightly said, that some of the leading indicators for those sort of changes are reimbursement frameworks and pathways coming up.
Mhm.
Germany, there is TIGA. In France, there is PECN for CE mark devices of all the classes. Belgium has got mHealth Belgium validation pyramid, where they have got a tiered model linking interoperability, integration, cybersecurity in a more structured way, like a health technology assessment, which is something similar in UK as well, with a nice endorsement, which is based on evidence standard framework, and then you go with the local reimbursement. So again, if you say Germany, France, and Belgium, their systems are such that you can get a national level reimbursement. And then US, as you very well said, it's quite mixed. It's picking up. There are some Medicare Advantage plans covering selected, I would say, digital therapeutics, but also there are insurers and underwriters, and also a lot of digital therapeutics could be offered via employer-based route in the individual, where there is an individual negotiations. I can just say from one of my previous work life, we had some interesting solutions where we had right sort of products with a very good evidence based. We were able to work with insurers and their underwriters in terms of sharing that evidence, sharing the health economics benefits to create a product, insurance products, where the company's products could be used and could result in a better patient outcomes as well as better economic outcomes for insurers. So again, that level of individual negotiations can be done in the markets like US, Japan as well. I could just see from research article that there are three DTX that have been approved in Japan, specifically
Mhm.
around nicotine dependence for smoking cessation, as well as hypertension management, insomnia therapies. Again, what they've done is they've set these sort of base for reimbursement, and this base reimbursement path for the future. Again, what really drives is here that there is a very strong clinical evidence and regulatory validations. First of all, it's all started with digital therapeutics definition. Again, that was created by ISO for regulators and payers, so they know, and they can now really say that this is how you define digital therapeutics. And once you have defined that, you know that what are appropriate evidence base and health economics evidence, you can really look at approving them. You can consider reimbursement for them as well. And what exactly are the drivers? If you really see, the drivers are that there is a significant pressure around health economics, that there is definitely a need for a scalable and a sustainable cost-effective management, specifically with chronic conditions. And we know that chronic conditions will increase. I mean, number of patients will increase gradually
Yeah.
with chronic conditions. Again, other thing is that real world outcomes. Now there is a lot of feasibility. There is now availability of data at every stage. Earlier, what you used to see was that there was a discrete set of data performed by certain type of tests. But now with digital health, you can have longitudinal data. That makes things a lot more easier in terms of collecting the data. So again, these are some of the factors that are driving towards the right level of frameworks and pathways for regulatory approvals, as well as leading through to reimbursement. And again, this is just the beginning, I would say. Other markets are just waiting to learn from these initial setups, as well said, that from Germany and France, other markets are learning that how this sort of things can be implemented. I was talking to someone at End Health in Australia a year and a half back, where they were looking at what's really happening in Europe and implementing something similar for Australia. Specifically, they were supporting TGA in terms of how to look at right level of evidence base, right level of framework for regulatory approvals, as well as reimbursement thing. Same thing is with Canada as well, similar to the structure and the way that their healthcare system is organized, similar to UK. So again, those sort of markets are leaning back to some of the success stories out from the Europe and US.
Yeah. So thank you for clearing that. So let's talk about some of the business models and commercialization challenges. Now, when we see at digital therapeutics, we see a lot of products coming up, but definitely this is one of the introductory phase for them. So you see a lot of commercialization challenges. Now we have seen in the market that hybrid models are gaining traction when it comes to digital therapeutics, where they combine B2B, payer, provider, pharma, and with D2C engagement to drive the adoption. Now, for example, the peer therapeutics Riseto or Achilles and EndeavorRx both pursued a prescription digital therapeutics pathway. And then we, on the contrast, we see direct to consumer models work best in the wellness class, which is under regulated solutions. And then manufacturers can avoid clinical gatekeepers just by lack of, because there's a lack of reimbursement. So what commercialization models are providing most effective for digital therapeutics companies? Is it B2B? Is it direct to consumer? Or is there a hybrid model that all the companies need to go through?
Very well said, Akash. I would say that specifically when we talk about the commercial models, I mean, before diving into, I would say, commercial models, I think it's important for us to distinguish between access and adoption. Reimbursement is a necessary enabler, but it does not guarantee of sustained clinical uptake. So if you have got reimbursement, doesn't mean that it will be adopted. I mean, some reimbursed digital therapeutics have struggled to scale because of limited, I would say, physician engagement, lack of integrations within the patient's care pathways, or there is a patient drop off after onboarding. That could be driven by multiple factors. Also, the way in which, I would say, digital solutions will be deployed and used may differ from one setting to another. I mean, if you just
Mhm.
implement that will not help. There are variability in that case that drives outcomes variability. than what we would have expected in the evidence that we would have generated. I mean, I can talk from my personal experience. About 3 years back, I deployed, I would say, three large scale pilots within the UK, within the population size of 250,000, and in three different sites at a primary care network level. There are again different sorts of GP practices where the systems were implemented for testing. I saw that there was such a huge variability and all had different clinical outcomes. I was expecting something similar, but there was a lot of variation. So way forward was to remove that variability, via managed service kind of implementation. But again, there might not be a suitable reimbursement pathways for such a service as opposed to what we see with the digital therapeutics. So again, there is no one size that fits all. But again, as you very well said, that hybrid models, these sort of hybrid models are, I would say, most effective for standalone digital therapeutics, where
Mhm.
in terms of hybrid model blends directly to consumers, and B2B, example, as you say, that payer, employers, or healthcare systems is providing the most effective particulars for standalone digital therapeutics. That's where, when you go about direct to consumer channel, that enables fast way of, in terms of market entry, real world data collection, and consumer engagement, right from the wellness space. Many of the companies, what they have done is, rather than going on regulatory route, they have launched their product as wellness, try to collect the data with going direct to consumer. But again, there are challenges around the same as well. As you know, that not everyone is willing to pay for standalone digital therapeutics, as such. If it's a combination therapeutics, you'll see that the patients
Yeah,
paying out
makes
of
sense.
pocket. But for digital, that has been the challenge. Things are moving, things are improving. But in the same case, there could also be B2B contracts with payers, with healthcare systems, which provides long-term scale, trust, and convergence. So by combining these two, there is a possibility of going direct to consumer also in the reimbursement space. If you really look at some of the programs that are offered, or some of the digital therapeutics that are offered by Kaya Health, they have
Mhm.
got, I would say, institutional way of getting into US. But if you talk about that in Germany, it is via healthcare systems. But again, if you look at their website, they still drive towards direct to patient in terms of marketing. That is possible if it's a direct standalone, I would say, digital therapeutics, where they can then get channeled through their primary care team or secondary care team for it to be prescribed, and to be covered from reimbursement. But again, if you really talk about limitations, when you talk about drug and digital combination products, there are limitations. You cannot directly go to patients, when it's a drug, in some of the markets. Specifically when the software is regulated alongside the linked pharmaceutical product, and we know that direct to consumer promotion is heavily restricted in most of the regulated
Yes.
markets, including in the EU, UK, and many parts of the Asia. I think US is a different
Yeah.
sort of market where you can get that level of promotions. So when you talk about that level of promotions, the combination products, I would say that they're deeply embedded via B2B strategies that are aligned with pharma market access, pharma sales force, pharma regulatory pathways, becoming more essential in that case. And you'll see a lot of co-commercialization models when you talk about DTX and drug combinations, as such. So it starts with, I mean, those sort of co-commercialization. It then moves to value-based contracting, or I would say companion digital services that are more appropriately marketed, such via healthcare professionals to the patients. And covered from the national reimbursement sort of payment mechanism, and the business model. So I would say that, yeah, hybrid models are more scalable for standalone DTX, where I would say direct to consumer is permitted. But for digital therapeutics embedded into combination products, it has to go through, I would say, a pharma sort of model, where B2B plays a bigger role. So again, it's hybrid. Again, it all depends on what solution is, which market you are in. So there are different commercial models that are explored I mean, from my perspective, having worked in pharma domain, having worked with digital therapeutics providers and tech partners as well.
Right. And you rightly said that variability is one of the key factors when it comes to commercialization. Now, when we talk about commercialization, we also need to talk about a different aspect of the reimbursement. One is that we already know that reimbursement is one of the top barriers, but most payers lack dedicated billing codes as well when it comes to digital therapeutics. And clinical inertia and provider skepticism is on the another on another hand is what's creating an integration challenge when it comes to digital therapeutics. Now, based on these current barriers of scaling digital therapeutics beyond, so what are the other barriers that are that are barriers for scaling this beyond pilot projects into widespread clinical use?
Sure, a great question, I should say. And in a way, if you really look at the barriers, we have already touched upon the barriers like regulatory fragmentation, lack of harmonized health technology assessment processes, and reimbursement limitations. Again, in earlier discussion, and that is the case for markets other than, I would say, Germany, France, Belgium, UK, US, where
Mhm.
you'll see more of these. But I would say that building on that, there are other several additional and equally critical factors to consider when you are really talking about scaling up of digital therapeutics. So rather than putting this question as what are the barriers, I would say what should be looked upon for the successful scale up. So again, first of all, there needs to be a great organizational alignment. So if you are into digital therapeutics, there needs to be a full alignment within your organizations, specifically in terms of internal cross-functional teams alignment, and you should have right level of capabilities that cross-functional team do understand what digital therapeutics is all about. So you'll have to do a lot of internal education in awareness regarding this. And when you talk about pharma and digital therapeutics partner collaboration, you are also relying on external stakeholders. So there is also many times you need to be aligned that smaller companies who are into DTX working with pharma needs to understand the pharma processes and the speed at which pharma works, and vice versa for pharma companies working with tech providers for co-developing the digital therapeutics needs to understand that tech works in a completely different way. Tech works at a lot faster pace. So again, there has to be a right balance between them. And the most important, I would say, is the senior management expectations. It is not a digital product, or it is not just a digital project. It's a development and a launch of a regulated healthcare product. Again, product development and launch life cycle is few years. I mean, not just months. So again, that level of expectations needs to be right there. If your organization is getting into, I would say, digital therapeutics, and for scaling them up, specifically pilots, yeah, you can do them, but also a lot of things needs to be improved from clinical workflow integration, such that digital therapeutics are embedded into routine care pathways. Many a times, I mean, it would be great if you can integrate it along with the electronic health records.
Mhm.
We will drive it in a really different way in terms of acceptability, as well as its use. Physicians engagement, I did mention about it. That is a
Yeah.
huge. Uh, at times, there is a lack of digital confidence amongst the peers. So again, digital therapeutics could be seen as adjunctive or a wellness tool rather than the evidence-based medical intervention. So a lot of education needs to be done in terms of evidence of digital therapeutics, education and training of physicians in terms of how to use this digital therapeutics, or how to deploy, or how to make sure that digital therapeutics adds value for their work as well as for their patients. And then as well, that will need appropriate engagement, education and training for physicians. Also, patient adherence and digital inclusivity plays a big role in here. So appropriate patient onboarding, so that the content is suitable and tailored for where patients are, specifically in terms of the region, cultural and language variations, and as such. And you'll also see that experience matters a lot in terms of, if you make experience a lot simpler, it's a lot engaging for patients, it will limit the dropout rate. And that has to be an equitable access. We all know that there is a huge digital divide in an access to infrastructure as well. So again, if you would want to look at the success, I would say that to focus on these elements or these factors will be quite crucial. Then not just considering them as barriers, but to embrace them and to work towards solutions such that it overcomes these challenges that will help towards better scalability.
Right. And we talked a lot about regulatory landscape here and there, regulatory hurdles, but we also see a lot of ambiguity across different regions. We did discuss it earlier as well. Now, most of the governments are increasingly being supportive for digital therapeutics, but there is invariability. So variability is always there, variability in the pathways, and then there are reimbursement frameworks remain one of the key bottlenecks for most of the countries. Now, how have regulatory frameworks evolved across different geographies? We do believe that Europe, as because of Germany's DIGA program, may be at the forefront of this. But how do you foresee and how do you see different geographies evolving and what gaps remain in different geographies?
Okay, I mean, if you really look at the key geographies here, I mean, before 2020, the regulations weren't there. Specifically, digital therapeutics was generally based on a broader medical device frameworks. So again, at that stage, even medical device regulations was not there. It was purely based on medical device directive then in Europe. So quite a lot of DTX were evaluated in that phase. If we talk about how it's really shaping up now going forward, or what changes have gone through in the last few years, I would say that US, specifically with FDA, prior to 2020, it was, I would say, pre-cert pilot tests were being launched to review trusted software makers. They started learning from it. By 2020, Digital Health Center of Excellence was set up as a part of US FDA, and recently they have even drafted guidance describing what software as a medical device and AI and ML apps should be looking like, or what needs to be up to date regarding them. But again, if you really see the way these programs or way these solutions are still evaluated, they still go through the cycle of 510K or de novo route. That is standard that we see for any medical device. So there is nothing specific for digital therapeutics as such. And as there are no separate categories for DTX yet, I would say getting reimbursement after approval is still a challenge in US market at a scale. So again, as we say, that you need to go and have that individual conversations and negotiations with various different levels of payers. As of 2023, you would have heard about PDURS, which is again prescription drugs use related software. FDA is now accepting in them along with your drugs, and that can be listed as a separate product. So again, that now drives towards additional innovation that pharma companies can provide with drug and software combinations. We already covered EU. We know that
Mhm.
there are medical device regulations as of 2017. Again, that was fully enforced from 2021, but was delayed by another couple of years as of COVID situation. But now they treat most digital therapeutics as class 2A, class 2B sort of software medical device. Reimbursement we have already discussed is at the forefront, but the challenge still there. After medical device regulation, there are fewer number of I would say notified bodies who can really look at your assessment and get you medical device regulations. There is some sort of waiting period, and due to this sort of bottleneck, there are gaps, and the approval is a bit slower. If you talk about Japan, again, they have got a DASH program for software as a medical device, where they're promoting the development and adoption of software as a medical device in a streamlined and regulatory, as a streamlined regulatory pathways. In 2022, there were guidance around evidence of what level of evidence needs to be generated for digital therapeutics. And again, similar to DIGA, and they have got two-step route for DTX approval that they have introduced as of 2023. Early market entry followed by real-world data confirmation. So they give you around first 12 months for you to generate that data, and then it could be again negotiated individually for any kind of reimbursement. So there are no reimbursement framework in terms as it and it's case by case. So as you can see that things are evolving, and it will continue to evolve. So is it with I would say Australia, so is it with Canada, where they are looking at it. There are draft I would say frameworks being discussed as a part of consultations, which you'll see in about a year or two. Other markets, other geographies will have regulations for software as a medical device, digital therapeutics, as well as reimbursement frameworks around the same. So again, things are evolving in this space.
Right. And we earlier discussed about how different outcomes have become more important than the volume. And so, with and I do understand that there is a variability on different platforms and they cater to different standards. But what kind of clinical evidence is now considered as the gold standard for regulatory approval? Could you comment on that?
Sure. I mean, when we talk about evidence as a gold standard, I would say regulators and payers they prefer several levels of evidence that mirrors, I would say, drug and medical device development. In addition to it, they would want to see software-specific checks as well. So again, there are if you look at several levels, there are four. First and foremost is the clinical trials, your pivotal trials, where you need to show the efficacy and safety. I mean, that's standard for any medical device or a drug that gets introduced, I would say, in market. So again, that there is an expectation that you will have a prospective randomized control trials in the form of either pragmatic or decentralized trials, or you demonstrate clinical meaningful, I would say, primary endpoints as such.
Mhm.
Now, it is okay for drug and digital therapeutics combinations where randomized control trials are feasible. But if you just talk about standalone, that's not really feasible. You cannot have a sham app and then consider, I would say, RCTs along with standalone. So what has happened is for standalone, there are real world evidence studies where they are acceptable as such for standalone, where you can really show that there is a clinical outcomes improvement as well as there's a health economics outcome improvement from outcomes evidence perspective. Then there are the human factors and usability evidence studies that you need to show and demonstrate that your tool, your software, your app, or your digital intervention is safe, effective across diverse populations, specifically age, literacy, tech fluency as well. Again, this has now been mandated by FDA as a human factor guidance, as well as in CE's medical device regulations, specifically around usability standards. Again, this also is very helpful. If you would have gone through this, you would have had shown that it's easily acceptable, and it could be easily adaptable within, I would say, provider, physicians, patients community as well. If it's easy to use, you know that it will be it's the chances of adoptions are higher. And then comes the last thing is health economics and outcomes research.
Yeah.
For access and reimbursement, specifically where there is a need to show that there is a cost effectiveness in terms of improved quality adjusted life years, QALYs, or I would say incremental cost effectiveness ratio to against that improvement towards the QALYs. So again, these are the four basic evidence levels that are needed for I would say regulatory as well as reimbursement approvals for digital therapeutics.
Thank you for clearing that. Since we move to the next section of this, I think so today no discussion ends without discussing the advent and the impact of AI on any technological platforms, right? So, what role do you see AI and machine learning playing in the next generation of digital therapeutics, specifically beyond personalized content delivery?
Sure. I mean, as it's a growing field, when we talk about AI, what can we really see is that you see AI and machine learning such that it can be used in a very broad way, not just personalization. It can
Mhm.
help towards driving that predictive analysis, predictive analytics based on data that gets generated through multiple sources, for which you can really look at understanding how disease are progressing, how disease onsets, whether there is going to be a relapse risk or symptoms worsening, etc. And proactive interventions could be offered. I mean, the very good example that I mentioned about was epilepsy and seizures. Again, that falls under this category, I would say. With the help of AI, a lot can be done in that space in terms of predictions. um, there could be a possibility of identifying missed opportunities in case of comorbidities, as we all know that when there is an aging patient, they might often have multiple comorbidities. A very good example could be diabetes and hypertension together, or patients who are following, I would say, stroke-related care pathways. When treatments are being offered, many a times interventions do not, or clinicians or the system or that intervention does not take into account patients' comorbidities. So again, with the availability of data, we can really look at some missed opportunities across multiple care pathways and patients' journey, or a patient's uh, care could be completely different, taking into account that comorbidities. Again, we all know about chatbots. I mean, a lot of virtual companion and conversational interfaces could be developed. Specifically, it's now very well used in triad systems to overcome, I would say, the challenge that we have with patients and medics ratio. Again, there could be clinicians facing decision augmentation tools. You hear a lot about these in radiology or in clinical decision support. So AI and machine learning will drive towards helping clinicians, helping healthcare systems to deliver more sustainable care going forward. And in I still believe that AI is not going to replace humans. It's more about helping and making sure that the care is optimized and it's more sustainable.
Right. Uh, so also what we see as in we see an integration of AI into different digital therapeutic platform. Now, furthermore, when we go on to elaborate this, you already spoke about it in brief earlier, but we would like to have a consolidated, understanding from you. Are we approaching a tipping point for where digital therapeutics will be bundled with diagnostics or devices to enhance engagement and outcomes?
Well, I can say that it is already happening. In fact, I have conceptualized and delivered programs about, as I mentioned, about 3 years back, specifically in atrial fibrillation. There was a huge challenge around, I would say, condition detection, protection, perfection within atrial fibrillation, and technologies were used to remotely detect and diagnose patients once they are at home during the COVID time. Once patients were diagnosed, clinicians were provided reports that were generated by AI, and also further curated by, I would say, cardiologists. That when those reports were shared with, I would say, primary care physicians, and also when patients were then put onto right level of medication, anticoagulant, as such. And also the patients who were on anticoagulant, there were, I would say, data driven assessments to see whether they are on the right level of treatment, based on their reports, based on multiple data. So right from detection to protection to perfection, these technologies were used. So, and you can say that it's already a digital therapeutics. I mean, I would say, if you would have asked this question 5 years back, yeah, that was the tipping point. But now we have passed that. It's already happening. Now is the way that we see these were pilots, and now we'll see, as I explained earlier on, that more of these you'll see at scale in I would say a couple of years time.
So can we also assume that in future we will see an amalgamation of digital therapeutics, diagnostic devices, and pharma together? Is there a possibility?
Yes, that's what it's already happening.
Okay. So The next section is very close to the heart because no discussion at BIS research ends without discussing the competition. So, which companies or categories do you believe will disrupt the digital therapeutic space next? So, any specific companies that come to your mind?
I would say it's all in parallel. You are now seeing these big tech companies like Apple and Google and Samsung. Their wearable devices are now a medical device on its own, and they provide a lot of insights that drives personalization. As such in the healthcare space, they are having partnerships with healthcare systems as such. Again, traditional pharma in partnership with tech startups and tech companies, they are already into DTX. I mean, traditional medtech, if you talk about it, they are adding digital therapeutics to medical devices and products, and they are now offering value-added services as a differentiation and better outcomes. Not just a transaction of selling a medical device, but end-to-end service around the same as well. Large pharmacy chains, you would have heard about lots in US, like Target, CVS. They are
Mhm.
now having digital offerings, digital therapeutics as an additional service, bringing care closer to the community rather than it being delivered in primary or secondary care where the cost is quite high. So I would say competition is going to be there, but it's a healthy competition. And you also see that there are a lot of partnerships among these players to make things
Mhm.
happen, uh, to make things implemented in very complex healthcare systems, and deployed that in scale. So yes, there are a lot of partnerships, but you'd also see programs being set by these sort of organizations individually as well.
That's great to hear because that uh, one way it shows that there is a lot of hope and growth avenues in digital therapeutics. Now, this is the last question from me, Soren. We already see a lot of economic burden across different healthcare systems,
Mhm.
and digital therapeutic companies are trying to navigate investor expectations. So, what advice would you give to emerging digital therapeutic companies?
Specifically when you touched upon how the investment market is facing, I would say that have a compelling story, have an emotional connect with what you're delivering. What hard clinical outcomes, what economic outcomes that you're driving, and what that ROI will be delivered. Again, have that compelling story at your own end. You should have a very sound product development, and not just product development, but also clinical, regulatory, reimbursement path that has been proven, or you will be proving going forward before you jump to scaling that thing up. So have that 360-degree view and know where you are heading. Be ready to pivot strategically towards your goal. uh, that you should have plan B if plan A doesn't work, as such. And as we mentioned, and we did touch that, regulatory and reimbursement space is constantly evolving. So keep up to date with regulatory requirements and think ahead so that it helps you to pivot and have your plan B as well. You might see that certain markets might have some barriers for from regulatory or reimbursement perspective. Some other markets might pop up. You should be agile enough to consider your strategy and your product deployment such that it caters where the demand could be, or where you can generate that demand via your network, via your right level of presence in those sort of markets where you see that markets are quite open in terms of regulatory and reimbursement frameworks. So yeah, I mean, this is I would say general advice that I give to also the startups with whom I have worked, as well as being part of in terms of close collaboration with.
Thank you so much for clearing that out. So before we close, we also have few questions from the audience. We'll take one or two. Uh, so the first question from the audience is that with the rise of remote patient monitoring and digital twins, how can digital therapeutic platforms leverage these technologies to deliver predictive and preventive care?
So purely, if you really look at it from remote monitoring, lot of data gets generated. all that data will help towards personalization. And when you talk about digital twin, I can correlate with one very good European research program that I was part of. Goodness, I would say like 15 years back. It was called Virtual Physiological Human. So they were creating a virtual model of a human where you can really test any particular interventions. Either it could be a pharmacological or any interventions at a various organs level, at a various cells level, to see how it could perform. So again, it's similar to like digital twin. So you can really look at that personalization with all the data that gets generated from remote monitoring. And again, it wouldn't be surprising to see that there will be more of research already going on around these space at some part, somewhere in the world.
Right. There's another question from the audience. This revolves more towards uh, how digital platforms evolving. How do you see digital platforms evolving to support multi-condition therapies? So we have seen specific targeted platforms, but is there an avenue for multi-condition therapies with patients like comorbidities are looked after along with the target condition?
Well, if you really would want to, I mean, I would put this question that way, that you cannot expect patients to have 10 different apps. You know,
Right.
things needs to converge in certain way. If you really would want patients to be using uh, I would say digital interventions for their comorbidities, and definitely that is something that I strongly believe in going forward, should be the case. And rightly said, there could be a lot of I would say collaborations between similar sort of disease areas, technology companies, or solutions providers. You might see a lot of M&As in those sort of space as well, where bringing I would say comorbidities which are closely related towards driving that patient outcomes. That's what I mentioned with identifying those sort of missed opportunities.
Yeah.
You won't be able to do if there are these apps or these interventions or these solutions working in silos. Needs to talk to each other, either through interoperability between them, or through I would say a tool which takes into account these comorbidities.
Okay. We have last two quick questions. One focuses on how do you perceive, or is there a scope for disease-specific traditional pharma collaborating with and partnering with digital therapeutics? The next one is on how emerging markets play a future growth prospect for digital therapeutics.
Well, if you really look at the first question that you asked, that's already happening. I
Yeah.
mean, you see the partnership between Click Therapeutics and Boehringer Ingelheim. In others, I would say similar sort of collaborations where you would see some pharma companies collaborating with specific digital health providers. Uh, and I mean, there are many examples out there where there are successful partnerships. Again, it's early days to see that how both parties leverage expertise of each other. For small companies like digital therapeutic companies, they do not have access to market presence in the way that pharma companies have. So, and pharma companies could get a lot of value add from this digital therapeutics when combined with their product. So you could see that there will be, I would say, a lot of collaborations going forward in a meaningful way.
Noted. So, another one was about emerging markets and how the innovators can overcome infrastructure and regulatory hurdles in these regions.
I would say it's a lot improving. I myself have considered, whilst I was working with some large companies, to see that if there are less regulatory hurdles or barriers, I would really have my pilot programs or small scale deployments in the market where I can get things going and learn from it, and also take that into other markets. That's called reverse innovation, and we have seen that with many medtech companies as well. Though at times it could have that your offering for emerging markets could be a lot more cost effective. As such, it's a great way to learn and take that learnings back into your other markets. But I would say that there are I mean, recently I've seen a lot of digital health, digital therapeutics projects, programs spurring across Asia, India, Middle East. I've seen a lot of that happening in Singapore region as well. So it's evolving, and it's a great opportunity for emerging markets to see and learn from the markets where there are standards, there are regulatory frameworks, there are reimbursement frameworks, to learn from it how they are faring, and to see that how things can be implemented in emerging markets.
Yeah. So I think we are at the end of the discussion, Swarin. This has been an insightful discussion, especially helping us understand how digital therapeutics will emerge, what are the hurdles, what are the technologies that are coming in, which are the companies to look out for. So on behalf of BIS Research, I thank you for joining in this discussion. Uh, Hoping to have much more similar discussions in the future. Wish you all the best and thank you once again.
Thank you, Akash, and thank you, BIS Research team.
Thank you, audience, as well.
Thank you.